Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight on this Thursday, December 11th, 2014. I'm joined now with Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, retired. We're going to talk about his personal experience, what he saw as far as torture goes. Just before the break, I was talking about torture at the highest level, and I want to get back into that as we start talking about this, Joe. But before I do, I want to let you know about our Secret 12, which is now back in stock. It's been sold out for weeks. We have a very difficult proprietary processing to get it in, but it's back in limited supply. This is the last shipment we're going to get until 2015, and it can take anywhere from weeks or months. We're talking about secret governments and secret tortures, but there's no secret here that B12 is very, very important for your nutrition. This is nutraceutical grade proprietary B12. It's taken by mouth, no needles, no injections. And it's got two forms of bioactive and super powerful B12. Secure yours now before we blast it out to our list tonight. We expect our limited supply to sell out, and you can get it by Christmas if you get it by December 17th. So we're getting pretty close to that deadline. If you're going to get anything from the Infowars store, you need to get it by December 17th for guaranteed Christmas delivery. Now, Joe, before the break, I was talking about how the people that we see now as head of the CIA, head of Homeland Security, head of the FBI. These are guys who are all doing cover for all this torture at the top level. Now, of course, we're told by this whitewash report from Senator Feinstein that nobody knew. Nobody knew. I mean, for 10 years, we've been talking about this at least. Okay, everybody's been talking about what's going on and complaining about it. But, of course, the White House didn't know until after legal clearance was given, and then they told George Bush about it. Colin Powell didn't know about any of this. These are reports we're seeing from NBC.
These are people who should know about this.
Yeah, exactly. So if they didn't know about that, then what are they doing in the position that they're in? I mean, at the very least, they should be fired. But, of course, nobody is going to go to jail for any of this. Instead, not only is nobody going to get punished, not only is nobody going to get shamed, and I think that was a big part of this, of course. Dianne Feinstein was very angry that she got spied on and her staff got spied on when they were doing this investigation. They took years to look at this. They've been looking at it for over 6 years. I think they've spent like $40–60 million on just their staff to investigate this. They were complaining about the fact that they had outside contractors who were paid $80 million.
Well, John Brennan said it wasn't spying, it was searching. They were just searching.
They were searching, okay. Yeah, this is something. Kurt Nemo's got a story up on Infowars.com today. Nazis designed the torture instruments for maintenance of CIA's terror war charade. He points out that this goes all the way back to Operation Paperclip, and even further than that, it goes back to the Nazi regime of 1937. They actually had a German term for enhanced interrogation, something they could do that would essentially not show up and cause any embarrassment for the people. And then as a reporter, he cites here, Annie Jacobson says, former Nazis were at the forefront of developing torture techniques for the U.S. government. Same thing we've seen with the biochemical weapons that were brought into Fort Detrick and other places. They brought these guys in from Germany, from Japan, who had been experimenting on people. They brought them in and made them the core of our bioweapons research. They also did the same thing at the CIA, making them the core of torture. They say the work took place at a clandestine facility in the American zone of occupied Germany called Camp King. The facility's chief medical doctor was Operation Paperclip's Dr. Walter Schreiber, former Surgeon General of the Third Reich. And the activities that went on in Camp King between 46 and the late 50s have been never fully accounted for by the Department of Defense or by the CIA, just as we're seeing today. So this is something that is a long-standing problem. It's not something we're just learning about from Dianne Feinstein. What Dianne Feinstein is trying to do is to give herself and Republicans immunity from prosecution and blame it all on the CIA. And then the CIA, nothing happens to them because they can say everything is a matter of national security.
Well, the people they put in charge of the the salt box area overseas where they were interrogating people, they said that the person they put in charge had never even worked in interrogations and or worked around prisoners. So you're going to put these people in charge of trying to get human intelligence, and they have no clue what they're doing whatsoever.
Let's talk about what you saw there, because when you and I went to Fort A.P. Hill, and we were looking at the American replica city that they have built there for the military to train and for police to train, against the American people. And that's where this is all coming, folks. Make no mistake about it. When we talk about the fact that the head of Homeland Security, the head of the FBI, these are guys who were involved in making legal excuses to try to give legal cover for this torture operation. They were rewarded. They were promoted to the head of our civilian law enforcement agency. So we were at this training facility looking at what they had there in terms of buildings, and we came across a building, and you said, that looks very much like the building that we used to deliver people to for what you believed was torture. Tell us about that.
Well, think about this. 10 years ago, when I went through training to go to the theater, to Iraq, the places we trained at looked just like it. Here we are, 10, 12 years later, and everything looks like small town America.
Yes.
And now I'm seeing some of those same things integrated from combat theater overseas now into these training exercise areas like Fort A.P. Hill or like the one at Camp Lejeune, where now you're seeing these torture chambers being put into small town USA training areas. And then we have the Marines out in L.A. conducting all these raids as well. So it's scary what it looks like it's coming to.
Yeah. And on the very same day that Dianne Feinstein releases her report, they passed the NDAA again for the fourth time under her leadership. And, of course, that's going to have indefinite detention by the military without trial. Presumably rendition as well as torture would all be included in that. Anybody that they claim is an enemy combatant. And then we see today that they have just tried to give themselves legal cover to spy on all Americans' communications without ever pretending that they need to go before a judge or get any verification from that in terms of a subpoena or a court order as required by the Constitution. They just ignore the Constitution and pass their law.
Well, it was interesting for me, David, when I was overseas, we would catch people who we knew, and I could tell with a gut feeling and seeing the things that they've done were bad people. We would catch them and they would release them 2-3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people that for beyond my reasons, they would take and torture. We would catch and release these people who make IEDs and things like that. People who actually went out and had a record of attacking coalition forces and attacking with suicide bombers and placing IEDs and small arms attacks, complex attacks. Those people, in essence, would be hided, put into a biometric scanning system, and then released to go back out and continue to do bad stuff. But we would take these people from like opium fields and farmers, and if they didn't want to play ball, they'd come back and they'd go in these rooms and we'd have to sit outside and I'd have to hear screaming. It's one of those things to hear a grown man scream so much that it goes from screaming to weeping. And the scariest part was when it went to silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you didn't hear anything else again.
Wow.
And not ever knowing if that person was going to come out or not. Because sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't.
That's just horrific. And, of course, we've seen some new things come out of this in terms of rectal feeding. Nobody had been talking about that. But we've known about the waterboarding for quite some time. And one of the things that we were told that they now say is a lie, of course, we knew it was a lie, that they were getting effective intelligence out of all this. When you talk about them catching, torturing, and releasing, the thing that went through my mind was going back to the Vietnam War. And I used to hear people that were a little bit older than me that went there talking about how they would go in and they would take an area and then they would just walk out and leave it again. And it's like, what's going on with that? The only way that makes any sense is if you understand that the people who are running these wars want it to continue. They want it to escalate. When you catch these people, you torture them, and then you release them, what are they going to do?
Retaliate.
Exactly. And that's what happened with the drone program. I think it's amazing that Brennan, who was running legal cover for them and was at the CIA, he's running legal cover for the enhanced interrogation. And, of course, he's Obama's first choice for CIA director, but then postpones it for 5 years. In the meantime, he puts him in charge of the drone assassination program. And, of course, he said a lot of interesting things about that. In June 2011, current CIA Director Brennan claimed U.S. counterterrorism operations had not resulted in, quote, a single collateral death in the past year. Then as they look at it, he goes, well, all right, 45, 56. Then a little bit later, 76. What they said was Brennan claimed that he said we had no information about any civilian non-combatants. And what people said was this was based on the assumption that anybody that was military-aged, any military-aged male, was a combatant, unless proven otherwise.
What's interesting, though, is we release 5 top Taliban leaders for Abu Bergdal, and yet there's still people in Guantanamo that they say they have no reasons to hold them
Mhm.
whatsoever. And they know that these enhanced torture techniques don't work at all. They don't get any viable information whatsoever out of them.
Well, one of the things that we had in a story that came out, one of the quotes that came out of the report was that someone said, "You're never going to get out of here because we don't want anybody to know what we did to you." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing it, but of course that is the key thing. And they didn't really try to get to the bottom of anything in the Senate report. They didn't interview anybody who was. They didn't interview anybody they believed had tortured people with the CIA. They didn't interview very many. If I didn't see they interviewed anybody who was a victim. These are reports that we heard of people who did get released, I believe. But there wasn't any discussion of what was going on in any direct sources. After 6 years of this, they never talked to anybody that did this or anybody that suffered from this. They just basically gave it a whitewash, looking at emails and documents.
Well, one night we caught some guys who were emplacing IEDs. We saw them through our NVGs and put bags over their head, zip tied it, separated them, 50 yards apart. And then the guys would go up that were with us. They're not regular military, I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Would go in there and you would see them like poking at him and be like, "You don't speak English, do you?" And the guy would just kind of sit there and he's like, "I bet there's one word you do know though, Guantanamo." And you'd see the guys literally urinate themselves in fear because they know that even if no matter what they could do at this point in time, they're done. Their life's over.
And see, that's a key part of it too. As Alex said yesterday, it's about engendering the fear. And it's starting very mildly in America now. I can go back and look at a lot of the stuff that they did. Of course, they killed people. As you mentioned, they mentioned just one person in this whole report that died from hypothermia because he was left exposed in a cold area on concrete floor. I'm sure there's many more than that died. And I'm not underestimating any of this waterboarding or any of the other stuff as being truly horrific. But some of the stuff that they did was just designed to humiliate people, making them wear women's underwear and that sort of thing. And when I look at that, I look at it and say, this is how it's beginning in the U.S. Much of what we see going on now with the TSA is merely humiliation. It's merely taking away your dignity. Once they take away your dignity, they take away your freedom. Once they take away your freedom, they can torture you. They can do anything they want to you. And, of course, we just had William Binney on, again, talking to Alex, and he said over and over again that what we have here is not an authoritarian regime, but a totalitarian regime. And the way that they get there is by grabbing our information. And today we see another massive grab, if you will, of Congress trying to pass a law that presumes to give them the authority to take people's communication.
Well, it seems like basic training for civilians now. That's what the TSA is doing. Because when you're a soldier, what they do, they break you down, they humiliate you, treat you like crap, tell you you're nothing, till you get to a point where you're just empty, bottomless, and all they can do is build you back up the way they want you.
Yes, exactly.
And it seems like that's what's starting to happen now with the American public. That's what they're trying.
Very good analogy. It's all a psyop. It's all a psyop. Pulling it down, destroying everything, taking you down to nothing, and then reconstructing society. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I saw, one of the reactions I saw that really stuck out to me was Chris Matthews talking to somebody who was complaining about the torturing. He says, "Come on, you're crazy if you think Al-Qaeda is going to stop torturing if we do." And I guess the question is, how do you tell then the difference between Al-Qaeda and the United States if we both torture? How do you tell the difference between the United States and the Nazis when we bring them in with Operation Paperclip as consultants to teach us how to do what they did? How do you tell the difference between us? And of course, we created, the CIA created Al-Qaeda.
It's a child's reaction. You put a kid in a toy box and he hits one kid, and then that kid retaliates and hits back and he goes, "Well, mommy, he hit me first." It's the same thing. They're going, "Well, the Taliban does it. So we might as well do the same thing."
Yeah, it's always, I forget who said this, but somebody said, when you fight monsters, you have to be careful that you don't become a monster yourself. And I see that happening. It's happened in America. Now we see all these things being done under color of law. I think it's interesting to go back and look at, let's take a look at the FBI director, James Comey. And of course, he seemed to be somewhat reluctant, but he went ahead and played ball. He was a deputy attorney general at the time. The New York Times reported that he argued repeatedly that the U.S. would regret using harsh methods, But he went along with the 2005 legal opinion asserting that the techniques used by the CIA were lawful, and he gave the green light for the CIA to use all 13 methods of interrogating terrorism suspects, including waterboarding and up to 180 hours of sleep deprivation. So there you go. He says it was ready to go out, and I concur. And those are emails that the New York Times got about that. Now, what happened to him? Did he get fired? Did he get disciplined? Did he go to jail? No, he got promoted to the head of the FBI.
That's what happens in America, apparently.
Yeah, that's what they want. That's what they want. We look at another guy, the guy who's head of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. He was general counsel for the DOD. He defended NDAA indefinite detention because that's the other part of this. Okay, that's where it's going to be applied to Americans because, of course, they're claiming that the entire world, including domestic soil here, is at a state of war. So they're going to involve the military, and we're going to have the same kind of rules of engagement that we saw happened in in Iraq and Afghanistan with the CIA. They're going to essentially do the same thing. And this came out of the report talking about how in February 2012, the administration represented by Jay Johnson, general counsel of the U.S. Department of Defense, defined the term associated forces so that they could apply it to essentially anybody with the NDAA. This is the guy who then subsequently becomes the head of Homeland Security and evidently is going to be passing for Obama when he didn't even sign his executive order. He's going to leave it to Jay Johnson to implement.
I mean, you can already see the transformation, though, going from combat overseas to what's going on now with our militarized police as well, though.
Yes.
The shoot first, ask questions, maybe down the road at some point in time.
Yes.
But 9 times out of 10, like you said, these cops do bad stuff. They don't get indicted. Sweep it under the rug and move on.
And they're desperate. They're desperate to arm the police. It's not only the training, not only how they're teaching them that they're operating in a war zone, that the public is the enemy. As I pointed out before, they said the whole idea that they hadn't killed anybody who was innocent. There wasn't any collateral damage, as the Pentagon pointed out.
And being choked to death on the ground by a police officer is torture to me.
Exactly. And when you look at this, the attitude that they had in country saying that if anybody was a military-age male, there was a presumption that they were not innocent. And that's the way they're policing the inner cities.
I've heard that many times when we're overseas. They're like, hey, that's an old enough guy. He could be a militant. Watch him.
Yeah.
Take him out if he makes a move.
Yeah. Which reminds us that, of course, people who are military-age males are the militia, and that's what's going to essentially be the only effect that we have to stand against this tyranny. We'll be right back with Joe Biggs. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here with Staff Sergeant retired Joe Biggs, and we're talking about what he saw on the ground in terms of torture. We've been looking at the people who are at the top of this, providing legal cover, who have not been shamed, they've not been punished, they've not been demoted or fired. No, they've been promoted to the positions of head of the CIA, head of the FBI, head of Homeland Security. That's what happens when you cover for these people. They basically move you up. One of the things I was looking at in the torture report, they were talking about the memorandum of notification. It seems to me it was more restrictive than even what they've put in with the NDAA. They had a quote in there where it says, "We are not permitted," they said, "to detain someone merely upon a suspicion that he or she has valuable information about terrorists or planned acts of terrorism." And yet they've been given a much broader range in the NDAA. They say merely they have to suspect that there's substantial support. And as you were pointing out, they were just going out and rounding people up, torturing them, and releasing them. They're essentially poking both sides of the war, just as we've seen them do in Vietnam, as we've seen them do in every kind of conflict. We've got the CIA operating here secretly as an unaccountable, compartmentalized government that is over and above the people who presumably have some oversight over them or appoint the head of the CIA. I mean, there is no oversight, and we're not going to see even the kind of oversight that we saw out of this report once Richard Burr gets in, because he's publicly gone on record saying that he doesn't think there's ever anything that the CIA does that ought to be made public.
Yeah, that's out of control.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, they should call that group, they should call these guys Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
Because that's all they are. It's just an incorporation of monsters. Just, it's mind-blowing to know the fact that they can go on national TV and swear an oath that things like this aren't happening.
Yes.
And to say that and to look in the eyes of the American people and just blatantly lie. I just don't understand it, especially when I've been out there and I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen since Obama's been president numerous times.
Yeah, nothing changed after Obama got in. And we're going to talk later in the
It got
program.
worse.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk later in the program about how the GOP has betrayed their voters who wanted them to get control of the illegal amnesty program, to shut down Obamacare, to do so many things and basically let people look and see what's in spending bills. We've had now 2 separate weeks where they basically introduced something on a Tuesday night, late 1,600-page bill, and said we've got to pass it by Thursday, giving congressmen and the press and the public only a few hours to look at what's in it. We're going to look at some of the things that have already shown up in the bill. Of course, there's not enough time for everybody to know everything that's in it, but there's some horrendous stuff in that. And Obama did the same thing to his supporters. A lot of people voted for him because they wanted to end the torture that was going on. They wanted to end the wars, and yet he's given us more wars. He's continued the torture. He added the drone program and put one of the guys who was giving legal cover for the torture program in charge of the drone program, who is now the head of the CIA, John Brennan. It just keeps going.
Yeah, and now they're going to send more troops to Iraq.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, we're going to shut that down, he says. We're going to close down Guantanamo. We're going to do all this. I haven't seen any of that happen yet, and it's only getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse here in America because, like I said, we're making a transformation from combat life overseas, and that's starting to pop up here in the homeland as well.
That's what people need to understand. They need to understand that this was merely training and preparation. They need to see how all of the groundwork is being laid for a massive tyranny here, how the NDAA and the legislation that was passed today, that's all going to be used against the American public. You and I saw it there at the training facility. When we come back, right after the break, we're going to talk about some more stuff that you saw in Afghanistan and Iraq, because that's what's missing. There's not any interview of the people who were there, who saw that, nothing of the people who were victims of that. Nobody who did it is being called in for questioning. Only the whistleblower who exposed it goes to prison. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, joined in studio with Joe Biggs. We've been talking about the torture report that was released. Of course, it is yet another step in the cover-up of 2 administrations. That should help you to get out of your left-right Republican Democrat paradigm to understand this is something that's gone on with 2 administrations. You've got the Obama administration covering for the Bush administration, and this is part of the cover-up. It's a massive whitewash. It excuses Feinstein, who had oversight during this time. It excuses Bush, those in the Bush administration. One of the things that they say, and this is interesting, Joe, number 7 out of their 20 findings, the CIA impeded effective White House oversight and decision-making. And yet, they point out later in the report that back in 2008, even after the Congress, the House and the Senate had approved legislation to stop what they were doing, essentially limit it to what was approved interrogation methods out of the Army Field Manual, that was vetoed by President Bush. And of course, we all know that they knew about this for a very long time. We've had the former chief lawyer of the CIA, Rizzo, wrote a book called Company Man, and in it he talks about how he provided the cover for enhanced interrogation. That was a major part of the book. But of course, when the book came out, everybody focused on the sensational aspects that there was some Hollywood big-name star that got paid $50,000 in cocaine to work for the CIA, completely ignoring the lies that this guy used for enhanced interrogation. And of course, the CIA, according to him, destroyed most of the detainee interrogation videotapes back in 2005. So they knew about this stuff for a long time. But you talked about what you saw personally there. You talked about how people brought out bags over their head. They didn't speak English. They threatened them with Guantanamo, scared them to death. Talk about some of the other things that you saw there.
Well, there was a program that started coming into effect a couple months before I left. So I was involved with it, and I was one of the people who was considered a need to know about it. Most of the soldiers in my unit had no idea the operation was even going on. They just knew that we would go on missions at night and grab people. And it's a program called Rocky. Now, what Rocky is an anti-tank mine. It looks like what we do, we bury it on the side of the road. It's got a tracking device in it. So what they do is then they take that information, they track that anti-tank mine to a house. Now, we've gone into these places numerous times, and there's no proof that these are IED-making facilities. It looked like just people had come across it and decided to get it off the road to maybe stop someone from running over it and getting hurt. Because you got a lot of people out there who really are just nice people who want to live a regular life. And we would go and get those people. and they would take them. And I think that from the bottom of my heart, it feels like they were using a lot of these local nationals in Afghanistan as just practice.
Yes, yes, that's the key.
That's the thing.
That's
like
the
I
key.
said,
It's practice for America. It's practice for other wars, but we have to understand that that dagger is pointed at our throat. We have to understand that. People have to. It was just amazing what you and I went through at AP Hill when the security guard let us in, and we were able to walk through that facility and see what they had set up. And of course, there's another one that's got slightly different kind of approach in North Carolina, I think it was.
Yeah, Camp Lejeune.
Yeah, Camp Lejeune.
The Marine base.
Yeah, that one is a more rural, suburban approach. This one was more urban. It had things that you would find in a city, but of course it had a church, it had a mosque.
Soccer field.
Exactly. I mean, it was
underground subway.
It was really bizarre as we walked through that, and the lights were working. You know, it's like this abandoned city, and of course we expect at any moment somebody was going to have an issue with that come run down us. But we stood there at the corner of First and Main, looking at what they're training for America, and this is what they were training for in Afghanistan.
Well, they're in Iraq as well. I mean, like I said, we would catch these bad guys, and I would see them emplacing IEDs. We would release them.
Yeah.
We would take people who had nothing to do with it, and they would be taken in the room sometimes. And like I said, you would hear the most god-awful screams. I wake up in the middle of the night here, and I get goosebumps even talking about it.
Yeah, we're going to be right back after the break. We're going to talk about another story that Joe is involved in, this one about abortion. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super Male Vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super Male Vitality by Infowars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com.